What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Landry Hat podcast powered by FanSided. I am your host, Zach. You can listen to the Landry Hat wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching this here on YouTube, please make sure you like this video, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode of Cowboys football this offseason. If you want even more Cowboys content, I have my own channel where I talk Cowboys at Double Move on YouTube. All one word, and Foots is not with me today. People that are listening on audio don't know that yet until I introduce him, but we did a show earlier this week previewing the Senior Bowl, talking about some guys we're interested in seeing down in Mobile, Alabama, and weather permitting, because the East Coast is expected to get a lot of snow and ice. If you're watching this from the East Coast, stay safe, stay warm, be prepared, all of that. I know Texas got some pretty bad weather too. I think that's starting today, Saturday morning. So you guys stay safe. I'm trying to get this video out before it hits the East Coast tonight into tomorrow morning. Again, shout out to FanSided and the guys over at the Landry Hat for giving us this opportunity to get on here and talk about even more Cowboys football with all of you. And we got a pretty fun episode today because we finally have answers to who the Cowboys' new defensive coordinator is, who they were looking at hiring. There was like 9 or 10 different names that they were interviewing, and they landed on the name Christian Parker. And if you're anything like me, it's Cowboys 365 days a year, so I'm sure you've heard a lot of different things about the hire, credentials, where he's worked before, his career path, what this means for the Cowboys moving forward. Are we excited? Are we not excited about the hire? All of that stuff. And that's what we're going to discuss in today's video. I'm going to go in depth on Christian Parker, what it means for the Cowboys, the player development, the culture, the identity, what he stands for, and why I am excited about this hire. So before we get started, if you want to go down to the comments and let me know your thoughts on Christian Parker so far, or wait until the end of this video. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you can come over here and leave your thoughts on YouTube. But if you are listening audio, please give us 5 stars. We're moving up the rankings of Cowboys podcasts. I saw it on Spotify. I saw it on Apple Podcasts. We're slowly moving up when you type in Dallas Cowboys. Keep rating us, please, 5 stars if you really, really enjoy it. Now, who is Christian Parker? That's what we're going to start with for today's show. Christian Parker is 34 years old. Yes, 34 years old. He becomes the youngest defensive coordinator in Cowboys history. I shared on last week's show or this week's show that Dallas has not hired a DC under the age of 50 since 2011, 15 years ago. And when that guy was hired, it was Rob Ryan at 49 years old. So it doesn't just stray off the path of, oh, well, this guy's under 50. We're talking about the youngest DC in Cowboys history. He also has a playing background. He played wide receiver and cornerback at the University of Richmond, but he's had a pretty interesting career path up to this point. He has college experience and NFL experience. And if you go and look at a lot of the DB coaches and pass game coordinators that Dallas had interviewed, like Jim Leonard or Durante Jones and eventually Christian Parker, a lot of these guys have very similar backgrounds and how they got into the NFL. They started in college, Christian Parker did, started coaching in 2013 at Virginia State as their defensive backs coach, moved to Norfolk State, Notre Dame, and Texas A&M, had different roles there as DB coach, defensive analyst. He was a DB coach at Norfolk State for 2 years in 2015 and 2016, the defensive analyst for Notre Dame in 2017, defensive analyst with Texas A&M, and then eventually into the NFL with the Green Bay Packers in 2019 and 2020 as the defensive quality control coach. Went to the Broncos for 2 or 3 years with Vic Fangio, eventually moved with Fangio to the Philadelphia Eagles where he was the pass game coordinator and DB's coach, and eventually he lands in Dallas. Now, I want to break down his NFL coaching career and guys that he's worked with because this is what I find extremely important. Jair Alexander in 2018 was selected by the Green Bay Packers. Turned out to be a really good player. Christian Parker was there in 2019, 2020, 2021 when... not 2021, 2019 and 2020, when Jair Alexander was really ascending as a cornerback. When Alexander was at the peak of his career, he's fallen off at this point. He's getting a little bit older. He's not the player that he once was. But early on in his career, Jair Alexander was a really good corner. Christian Parker was there working with him. Then he goes to Denver. In 2021, they select Pat Surtain. That's when they had Justin Simmons. There's a couple other names, but in 2021, when the Broncos selected Surtain, Christian Parker was there. Then you look at it with the Philadelphia Eagles as the pass game coordinator and DB's coach. In his first year with Philadelphia, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. They end up going to the Super Bowl with two rookie cornerbacks, two very good players that a lot of us liked going into the draft. But for him to have those guys playing the way that they were in that Super Bowl, Cooper DeJean had a pick six. Quinyon Mitchell, I think, had an all-pro year as a rookie or an all-pro year this year. Like, he has some pedigree. He has credentials and reputation. He's been working with Vic Fangio, one of the NFL's most respected defensive minds. He was part of that Eagles Super Bowl winning coaching staff and one of the best defenses in the league. Again, those defenses had players, but it also, do you guys remember how bad the Eagles defense was 4 or 5 years ago and how they've been able to build that up? That's kind of what we're looking at with the Cowboys. You can really turn it around. If Christian Parker is the guy and he turns out to be the guy, if you give him a year or two and you draft well and player development goes well, you can start getting at least close to what the Philadelphia Eagles were defensively and even this year because of a coach like this, a guy that has an eye for talent. Not that he selected Jair Alexander in 2019 and 2020. He was the defensive quality control coach, but he still worked with those guys, closely with those guys. A quality control coach is kind of like an entry-level position into the NFL, especially coming out of college. But to see him ascend from 2019 to 2025, and then eventually in 2026 become a defensive coordinator. And so less than 7 years, this guy has worked himself up from a quality control coach to a defensive coordinator. Then, if he's good as a DC, in 3 or 4 years, he could be a head coach. He could literally go from an entry-level position all the way to being in consideration for head coaching job in less than 10 years in the NFL, and I think that says something about the credentials and the reputation. Cooper DeJean was tweeted out that he was really going to miss him, that he wasn't going to be the same player, or he isn't the same player that he was before, and that's because of Christian Parker and what he was able to do with that secondary. I think Quinyon Mitchell would say the same thing. Both of those guys were all pros under his coaching. He definitely had more of a hand in their development, I would say, than maybe Surtain or Alexander or anything like that. If you want proof and you want to say concrete evidence that this guy can develop, especially cornerbacks and defensive backs, those two guys are perfect examples. The Eagles secondary under Parker as the pass game coordinator was one of the best in the league, especially passing defense-wise, and he's been praised by DeJean, and I'm sure Mitchell will have something to say when he gets interviewed about it. And the media, he's really like a rising coaching star in the NFL, and a lot of people have been saying, well, how do you know he's good? He hasn't called plays, this and that. And I just want to remind everybody, every single head coach, every coordinator, every position coach at one point has had to get their start. They at some point, they had to be a first-time play caller. They had to be a first-time position coach. They had to be a first-time head coach. I think that's what we've been so like just unhappy with the Cowboys is they don't want to take that risk. They haven't in the past wanted to take a chance on that guy, like a Mike McDonald in Baltimore. He was a first-time play caller. He really built that defense up. He gets a head coaching opportunity. Now look where the Seattle Seahawks are. Not that that's an easy path or that's just a given just because a guy hasn't called plays. That just makes him instantly a good play caller. But I like the idea of taking a chance on a guy that hasn't proven that, yeah, he's an okay DC and he's a bad head coach and he has experience with this, and this, but a lot of his success came in an NFL that was 10 years ago, a decade ago. A lot of his NFL success hasn't been recent. This guy is up and coming, and he has proof in his coaching jobs and success that he can develop, especially the back end of a defense with those DBs and safety. So a rising star. I like why the Cowboys hired him. I like their thought process and the entire hiring process in general. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to Brian Schottenheimer. This was not run like a typical Cowboys hire where they interview 3 names. 2 of them, you're like, I mean, I guess like it kind of makes sense why they would want to interview Rob Ryan or Ron Rivera. They would interview 3 or 4 different names, and you're like, okay, none of these are very interesting, but there's one that stands out above the rest, and that's the guy that they end up hiring. This process was completely different. You can tell that Brian Schottenheimer got full free reign to do what he wanted with the coach, because at the end of the day, this is tied to his career. This is the 5th defensive coordinator in 5 years, and I'm sure Jerry and Steven and Will and whoever else in the front office is getting tired of doing this. Constantly, all right, let's hire this DC. Oh, well, our defense is terrible. Let's fire him and go find another one. That gets old after a while. I have to imagine that there's been a conversation in the Cowboys building about we have to get this right. We cannot just say, oh, well, we messed up on that hire, move to the next one. Oh, well, we messed up on that hire and move to the next one. This feels like the Cowboys front office said, Shotty, you get to pick your defensive coordinator. You're the head coach. You get full reign over that. But this guy is tied to you. This is part of your job as a coach, to find a guy that you don't have to go into the defensive meeting room and try to help understand the analytics and what's working and what's not working, and take your time and go sit in the defensive meeting room because the defense is so bad under Matt Eberflus. You hire whoever you want, but this guy is tied directly to you. And when we look at your job as a coach and how well you've done things, we're going to look at how the defensive coordinator performed. And I love that. That's exactly how coaches should be. Schottenheimer has an idea of the team that he wants, and that begins with the coaches. That's at the top. Everything starts at the top. So Jerry and Steven need to back off, let the coach do everything, and then go from there. If it doesn't work, you can implode it and start over, and just keep doing that until you find the formula that works, instead of, okay, well, we got our head coach, well, we want this defensive coordinator, or we want this offensive coordinator, or we want this and this and this, and then it doesn't end up working because the philosophies don't match up. I am honestly surprised by how much respect that Jerry and Steven have for Schottenheimer, because it didn't feel like other coaches have gotten that opportunity. Even with Mike McCarthy, they're like, Kellen Moore's staying. Even though you're here, Kellen Moore is going to be the offensive play caller. Or when they did hire Schottenheimer, they were like, okay, Eberflus is your DC. He didn't get an opportunity or a chance to really interview anybody else. That was his DC. 1 year removed from that, they're like, you do it. You figure it out. And I really like how the Cowboys went about that process. So there's a couple of reasons why the Cowboys hired Parker. One, the defense was a major weakness in 2025. They were near the bottom in every single defensive category, in points allowed, yards allowed, turnovers, sacks, etc. They were terrible. The proof was in the pudding that Matt Eberflus was not it. So what do you do instead of hiring a guy that's just like him, that's coming off a failed head coaching job wherever, and then he used to be a DC, and yeah, sure, he had good defenses. What do? You go the opposite way. You go young and innovative. They've historically hired those older, experienced coordinators instead of putting their faith in like a young coach that is strategic and understands the nuances of what's going on in 2026. Not success in 2018, not success in 2019, success today. Knows trends. Sean McVay was the guy that changed it for offenses. Like, okay, this guy, like, he's a young head coach, but he knows how the game works. He can find all of these little cracks and crevices and start exploiting things to score points and be good offensively. And then Mike McDonald feels like the shift defensively, where, wow, that guy kind of came out of nowhere and this philosophy really works, and he's young and he ends up getting a head coaching job, and the Seattle Seahawks turn out to be a really good team. It's just how the NFL is moving. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over. And I told you guys, 2011 was the last time that they hired a DC under the age of 50. They've been doing the same thing for 15 years. at some point, you got to try something else because the past 15 years haven't really worked out. I would say that Dan Quinn being the DC turned out pretty good, all things considering, because before he was here, it was terrible. And after he was gone, it was terrible again. And they're just cycling through these DCs. I like the idea of getting a fresh, energetic defensive identity that isn't their status quo, what they typically do. I also think that in these interviews, Schottenheimer has an idea of what this roster is going to look like. I think scheme fit and personnel fit, philosophy fit was a really big thing, and I believe that Parker blew them away in a lot of those interviews because his schemes are going to resemble like a Vic Fangio inspired, a lot of cover six, but different nuances and rotations, and Vic Fangio runs a lot of cover six, and I might actually link a video down below in the comments here on YouTube that Brett Coleman released a couple of weeks ago about Vic Fangio and what his defenses do and why they're so good and how the Eagles have the success that they do because of their different nuances and how they do cover six. Responsibilities of the safeties. It's a lot of really interesting stuff. And I think Parker, knowing that and seeing the success that it had in Philadelphia, working under Vic Fangio, not just in Philadelphia, but in Denver as well, really impressed the Cowboys staff. Now, John Owning on Twitter posted the Eagles' coverage schemes, their percentage of snaps that they ran defensively. Cover six was number one, 18.3% of the time. They ran 217 snaps of cover six. Right behind that, literally one snap less, was cover one. They ran that 216 times, 18.2% of the time. And then it was cover three seam, quarters, cover three, cover zero, red zone, cover two man, and then there was unknown, cover one double. But for the most part, it's a lot of cover six, cover one, and cover three. For reference, Vic Fangio with the Eagles ran 217 plays of cover six. There's obviously some variation in there with what they're doing, what different responsibilities and stuff are based on the offense. But the Cowboys ran cover six 38 times in 2025 under Matt Eberflus. 38 plays of their 560 plays. They ran cover six 38 times. Cover one man was 99 plays. That was for their primary coverage, man coverage scheme in 2025 under Eberflus. Vic Fangio and them, 216 plays, 18.2%. Definitely different philosophies. We're going to hear more. I can't wait to listen to Christian Parker talk and what he thinks, because that was when I really got excited about Schottenheimer being the head coach, when he talked about like what his plans were for the offense. And I thought he did a pretty good job of that this year. There were some things in the red zone, but we can save that for another day. I thought for the most part, everything Schottenheimer got up there and said he did with the offense, and hopefully we can say the same thing about Christian Parker after this year.
Football playoffs are here, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the gridiron action. The best part about Underdog is how easy it is to play. Just pick your favorite players, will go higher or lower on stats like touchdowns, rushing yards, receptions, and more. Hit on all of them, and you can win up to 5,000 times your cash. Conference Championship Weekend is here, with the 1-seed Broncos hosting the 2-seed Patriots in the AFC and the 1-seed Seahawks hosting the 5-seed Rams in the NFC. In Broncos Patriots, I'm looking at Drake May for higher than 225.5 passing yards. He's eclipsed that mark 14 times this season, including the playoffs. I'm also looking at RJ Harvey for lower than 10.5 yards for his longest rush, and Trevion Henderson for lower than 5.5 receiving yards. Harvey had 10 games this season in which his longest run was shorter than 10 yards, and starting running back J.K. Dobbins is back practicing. Henderson, meanwhile, has allowed just 3 total targets in his last 5 games dating back to the regular season, and since the playoffs started, he has conceded a lot of touches to Ramondre Stevenson. In Seahawks-Rams, I'm looking at Kenneth Walker for higher than 22.5 receiving yards. Zach Charbonnet suffered a torn ACL last week versus the 49ers, positioning Walker to be Seattle's workhorse running back. I'm expecting the Seahawks to use Walker as an outlet early to help offset the Rams' ferocious pass rush. Download the app today and use promo code Landry to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. That's promo code Landry. Underdog, make picks, win money.
So the big question now is they get their new DC. They got rid of Eberflus. They got Christian Parker. They got Younger. They got a guy with different philosophies that worked under Vic Fangio. What does this mean for the Cowboys defense? Parker is a DB's guy. He's been a DB's coach. He's been a pass game coordinator. I think you can expect more coverage discipline, less exposing guys to things that they're not good at, and more innovative zone, maybe some more post-snap movement, rotations. I think you're going to see more coverage discipline, guys knowing where they are. You're going to see different techniques, hopefully not playing 10 to 12 yards off the ball, but just reducing the big plays that they allowed so bad in 2025 because it seemed like guys didn't know what they were doing. I expect an immediate impact with just their overall pass defense efficiency, not giving up 20-yard play after 20-yard play after 20-yard play, not giving up a 4-play 75-yard touchdown drive to open up a game. I expect the secondary to be a little bit more buttoned up than we saw under Eberflus because I feel like players were confused and not understanding their assignments and just not really bought into his philosophy at all. With Christian Parker, you're getting a guy that is young, but also has worked with DBs, know what makes them tick, know bad tendencies or eyes looking the wrong way or not being in position. You're getting a guy that is a DB whisperer per se. I know that's a strong word because we called Matt Eberflus the linebacker whisperer, and that didn't turn out to be true, but I do have faith in Parker to reduce the big plays that they allowed so much in 2025. I think you're going to see better player development. This is probably what I'm the most excited about with this hire. With young defensive backs like Savon Revel, Kalen Carson, I would even say Deron Bland. I know he got paid, but just having a coach with a strong track record of developing secondaries with Pat Surtain and Jair Alexander and Justin Simmons and just having that pedigree with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, like you can just go down the line, go down with the players that he's worked with and say he developed that guy was an all-pro, that guy was an all-pro as a rookie. That gets me excited about the player development because if you can get Kalen Carson playing good football and get Deron Bland back with his confidence, I'm sure that Parker's going to be excited to work with Bland. Same thing with Revel. Long, lanky, man-type corner. But the development, we didn't see that towards the back half of the year. It felt like it kind of got worse as his confidence got worse. And I think that's a little underrated part of this hire too. If you would have kept Eberflus around, a lot of the things that Revel struggled with and maybe Kalen Carson struggled with and Bland struggled with, that confidence wouldn't come back with the same coach because he's going to be asking them to do the same things. It's going to be the same practices, the same training camp, the same everything. And their confidence was shot at the end of the year. Revel, you could tell that he wasn't as confident, especially as the season went on, the more big plays that he got exposed to. And Bland just didn't look like the same player either. Even when he was in position, getting a new head coach that knows how to develop guys can maybe get rid of some negative tendencies that these players have. I'm really, really excited about that. And then just culture and identity, just a shift from Eberflus's system that struggled so bad in 2025. Guys were not bought in even the slightest bit. You could tell at the end of the year. There was no accountability. There was looked like preparation on defense, just getting blown up in the run game, getting blown up in the passing game, giving up 20-yard play after 20-yard play. Guys are looking around at each other like, okay, that was on you. Wait, no, that was on me. That was on you. Not knowing what's going on. Just having that shift, a different voice in the room is a big, big part of this hire. So before we finish this episode, I want to talk about two more things. Number one, what's going to happen with the rest of the Cowboys coaching staff. Apparently, Dallas has allowed their defensive assistants from last year under Eberflus. We heard that they were going to keep those guys around. They were all under contract, all this. They have given those guys permission to go interview with other teams. I know Aaron Whitecotton is going to interview with the Tennessee Titans for their defensive coordinator job, but also they're going to give these assistant coaches the opportunity to interview with Christian Parker as well. So they're going to have to interview with the new DC if they want to stay around in the Cowboys building. I actually really, really like that. I want him to have position coaches and guys that match his philosophy and understand that what he wants to do, and not just people that Eberflus hired. I really like that idea, not just keeping them around, because we saw how that went last year. When you automatically stick a head coach with a DC that he didn't pick, things get a little weird and there's miscommunication and the team just felt disjointed because the head coach wasn't really the guy that wanted the defensive coordinator. It was the front office. I like the idea of letting him interview guys. And if he doesn't want to keep some of these position coaches around, maybe Aaron Whitecotton gets the defensive coordinator job in Tennessee, or maybe he comes back to Dallas, interviews with Parker, and then he stays as the defensive line coach. I just want those philosophies to match up. Really good idea for me. And then finally, before we end this episode, what does this mean for the draft? I have some thoughts on this, but my most simple, bare bones theory, they're going to draft a corner. 100%. 100%. Look at everybody that they interviewed, really outside of Aaron Whitecotton. For the most part, were secondary guys. Where did Dallas struggle the most? In the secondary. Could Dallas draft 2 corners in the first round? I know you have Revel. I know you have Carson. I know you have Bland. But also, look how much it changed the Eagles secondary having 2 top-tier players in that room. Like, I know Bland just got paid. I know Revel's there. He was a 3rd-round pick. I know he was coming off an ACL, but can you 100% bet on that? That is what's gotten Dallas in trouble in the past, saying, well, we think we're good enough here, or if this guy takes a step, we'll be good enough. I don't think you can do that anymore. With Parker, you would tie the next 3 to 4 years to those cornerbacks' development, and it could really change your secondary. Maybe you take Mansour Delane at 12, and then Jerome McCoy is sitting there at 20. Or, I don't know, throw out another cornerback name, then you're talking about completely changing your defensive backfield. Maybe it's a safety. Maybe Emmanuel McNeil Warren is worth a late 1st-round pick if Dallas were to move back. I don't hate the idea at all of maybe getting Parker the DBs that he wants and starting the rebuild there, because I think you're pretty solid on the interior of the defense with Quinnen Williams and Osa Odigizua, and maybe Kenny Clark does end up staying around. Maybe you take a pass rusher. We know how much Dallas loves to draft their pass rushers. But just based on how they went about this head coaching search, I think it means for the draft that you should expect quite a few defensive backs to get drafted, even with Carson, Revel, and Bland. And I'm really excited about that. I'm a Mansour Delane guy at 12. Me and Foots are going to talk even more draft next week. Yes, next week in Mobile. We'll get to see a bunch of corners there. Emmanuel McNeil Warren will be in Mobile, will be practicing. Maybe that's a guy we discuss a little bit more based on how he looks out there on the field. I'm just excited. Parker brings a new defensive philosophy and really a culture reset on the defensive side of the ball. Now you have a chance for guys to buy in. You can not re-sign a bunch of defensive players and let him and Shotty be a big part of going to get the guys that they want, going to get guys that fit their philosophy. And the defensive side of the ball is going to be much more buttoned up, bringing in a youthful guy with DB development that's Fangio influenced. I love it. So you guys let me know down below in the comments what you think. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, if you enjoyed today's episode, give us 5 stars. When you type in Dallas Cowboys on audio platforms, we're getting up there, right? We're like 10, 11, 12. We need to get higher. We want to be like 5. We want to be like top 5, right? So if you guys could, give us 5 stars. Tell us how much you like the show and things we can improve on as well. If you're watching this here on YouTube, we're already over 5,000 subscribers. I really appreciate you guys for hanging out with me, listening to me yap about the Cowboys for 30 minutes straight while I try to keep all of my ADD thoughts in line. You guys are the best. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching today's episode. The Landry Hat Podcast powered by FanSided. Thank you to FanSided for giving us this opportunity. And thank you for the opportunity for letting us go down to Mobile, Alabama and talk to some players and get credentials and all of that. We really appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.